Hello, good morning. Welcome to Sunrise Daily. I'm Ayo Makinde.
It's a beautiful Thursday morning from here in Lagos. I am Kayode Kikyodo.
And as you can see, this way, it's time to take a look at the paper straight away.
Yeah.
And naturally, we usually have a guest at this time. Dayo Akitobi joins us this morning. He is a publisher of TCN. Thanks so much for your time today.
A very fine morning to you both and to our viewers.
All right. So, well, as one would expect, security seems to take the cake again. The Nigerian Tribune leads with this one. Why Buhari should resign. Northern Elders Forum. The story is on page 5 as well as page 30. As he agrees to address reps. Bandits rule communities in northern Nigeria, according to JNI. Bandits behead farmer in Kogi. Gunmen kill ACP in Calabar, Edo councillor kidnapped. Another 3 killed in Plateau. So the Northern Elders are talking. President has agreed to address the reps, and the bandits don't seem to be letting.
The big story coming out of yesterday, of course, is the fact that the president has agreed to address the nation through our representatives. In view of what happened last week in Borno with the farmers, 43 of them killed and beheaded, the voices of anguish have reached a crescendo to where the presidency actually now needs to show some good faith and some strength in terms of the focus towards addressing this insecurity issue. And I think it's a good step that he has decided to talk to the people. I would have preferred, actually, I think it's not out of the ordinary for him to have even visited Borno and shown some empathy towards the loss of life and to show a commitment towards actually trying to address these issues. But even if he chose not to go there, this step about going to the House of Reps is a step in the right direction. The only concern for me is, based on his precedent, we'll probably see a pre-written speech. The House will probably not even really put his feet to the fire as such. What I would have liked to see was an engagement, the way they have it in the UK Parliament, where the Prime Minister has a one-on-one engagement and all of anybody can step up, ask him questions directly. He has to answer directly. There's no prepared speech. So I don't know how much of a proper exposition will we get from his visiting the House of Rep. It just might be something to appease the restiveness in the polity at the moment.
You know, the conversation has been quite tricky because, I mean, you speak to some security experts and they say, well, this is security. You can't say everything on TV. I'm sure you've heard that time and again. And yet there's that need for the president to address the nation. I mean, we've just seen killings across the country. I mean, just today we had more killings, or at least on the front pages. So how do you balance it, the talk about, well, you can't say everything on TV. I mean, you can't even, tell your enemy what you're planning to do next. So how do we strike a balance, really, if we're looking at a point or at a situation where the reps can ask questions?
Yes.
I mean, how do we filter and ensure that we don't lose the war just because we need to address the nation? I think you understand what
I certainly do. And asking and answering questions, one does not have to necessarily reveal sensitive information. The purpose of hearing from the president is for reassurance. He doesn't have to discuss tactics or strategy. That would, of course, be undermining whatever security initiatives they're trying to put forward. But to inspire confidence in the people, to give us peace of mind, to put our minds at rest, he needs to speak. And he can speak, engage with the representatives. I'm sure they're responsible enough to the point that they will not be asking him for a national security strategy to discuss in public. Nonetheless, probably what they will do is after he reads his speech, they may go inside to an executive session that the media is not allowed, at which time they can now discuss the more intricate security issues.
Well,
but for his public engagement, he needs to reassure us a little bit because nobody is sleeping very well right now.
What, in your opinion, would be reassuring? I mean, what do you expect to be different in this speech? Because from what you're saying, it doesn't look like anything is going to be different. One major thing a number of people have been saying for as long as anyone can remember is that the service chiefs should be relieved of their duties. So do you see that being part of the address of the president?
Well, I've said it here on this program before, that there are certain things about security that we're not privy to that the government knows. For the president, in spite of the public outcry for so long, for him to have still kept the service chiefs, it's obvious that there's something he knows that we don't know. My conspiratorial mind tells me that he's probably looked at all those who are
on the line.
Who
right
are
after.
on the line and figured out that there's nobody there that can do any better than those who are there now. However, from a political standpoint, which shows that you are sensitive to the cries of your people, even if it is just a superficial measure, even if he knows that those who, well, for one thing, they can't really be any worse. They may not be better, but they can't really be any worse, because I think we've hit rock bottom with the way the security is going right now. So I would, from a political standpoint, just to appease the agitations of the people, even if I didn't believe they could do any better, superficially, I would replace them.
Well, so many other issues to look at on the front pages of the paper this morning, but I think I'll stop there.
Well, take a look at Vanguard newspaper. Lead story.
Yes.
Military overwhelmed by security challenges.
Yes.
Governors. Oh, you say yes?
I said, no, I'm just saying, yes, I've seen that story.
Okay,
I'm not saying I agree with it.
You see, more Nigerians will get arms for self-defense if government fails to mop up arms. That's JNI. Pope Francis condemns Zabamari killings. Praise for Nigeria. Buhari has agreed to address reps by Jabiamila. Survivors of Borno massacre recount tales of horror. It's on page 4 and pages 5. Man, it's just a lot. But you see the front page picture shows fuel tanker explosion. And you can almost guess where that happened.
Yes, that seems to be a recurring theme now.
Oh, yes.
And it's always in the very same area. I wonder what it is about that particular area that makes it so susceptible to petrol tanker explosions, accidents. I'm looking forward to when the rail will actually come online and more of these products can be moved by rail as opposed to by road, because that seems to be a death trap. It's really a recurring theme. And I think the Ministry of Works should look at that area
Really?
and see what the issues are.
Yeah, thinking about it, I mean, in the space of just 1 year, we've had dozens of explosions. I mean, if you apply that route, by the way, we're talking about the Lagos-Ibadan Expressway.
Yes.
If you apply that route, you know how many times you've had to be stuck in traffic, not for minutes, for hours, just because a truck or a trailer or an articulated vehicle had some issue. So who should be looking into this, really? Because, yes, you said the Ministry of Works, but clearly it appears as though that is not happening. So how should we put pressure such that we look into this? What more can we do?
This is part of what I've said, is that we need to get the trucks off the road to begin with, because they shouldn't be jostling with vehicles, with pedestrians, with motorbikes and tricycles. They are a different type of articulation. That's why they're called articulated vehicles. And their use of the road is detrimental to the use of regular road users. At one point, they said, let them travel at night alone, not during the day. But that doesn't stop these accidents from happening. So I think road safety is out there. Every time you're on that expressway, road safety is there trying to maintain law and order and proper driving etiquette, but it doesn't seem to help. So I don't know what the topography of the road is within that axis that makes it so vulnerable to these types of accidents from articulated vehicles. So the long-term solution is get those trucks off the road. So let's start transporting their goods by rail.
Look forward to that. Don't forget that story about Amotekun also arresting suspected killers of the Ondo monarch, the Olufon. And Sports page has that story on Zidane, saying Zidane has 4 games to save his job. Says, I'm not going to resign. This has happened before. And now we're seeing the possibility of Zidane leaving Real Madrid. So, for the sports lovers, grab a copy of the Vanguard newspaper.
The Nigerian News Direct is pretty much talking about the same thing this morning. State of insecurity, Buhari to address House of Representatives. That's the lead story of the paper this morning, along with several other stories that you'll find quite interesting on the front page. FG to sanction discos selling meters. Really, do you see that happening?
Meters are supposed to be distributed free. That's what the regulation is. They're supposed to be given out free. So anybody who is selling it is in violation of the law. And yeah, it should be sanctioned. Whether it will now happen that way or not, because as we all know, the system is fraught with loopholes, shortcomings, there's corruption in the system. But I think that we should have people whistleblowing voluntarily. If somebody asks you to pay for a meter at this point in time, I think you should cry out.
Well, it's the same discourse that I've been saying, as loud as anyone can remember, that, look, you need to pay X amount of money if you want a meter to your house, and you pay over time for the balance of it. A number of people have said that we have paid X amount of money for our meters, and we still don't have them. So is this some kind of double speak, or is just some measures or some communication that people are mixing up?
No, I don't think so. I think that there's a cutoff point from where a payment was due and when they were made free. The issue is, how do you reconcile those who have paid before and haven't received yet versus the new applicants who are going to get it free? Because it looks like there's a double standard or it's unfair. But what I found intriguing there was that there's also the accusation from the discos that there's some consumers who are refusing metering.
Oh, yeah.
And I said, what is that all about? There's some who are saying, we don't want the meters. So you begin to ask yourself, hang on, what's really going on here? If some are clamoring and saying they're asking them to pay for it, and others are saying we don't even want it to begin with, those may be some issues that need to be interrogated deeply.
I think the challenge also is the fact that, there are different types of meters.
Yes.
There's a three-phase meters, which is more expensive than, I think, the two-phase meters.
Yes.
So most times what you find is people who want to pay for two-phase meters are forced to get the three-phase meters. So that means they have to pay more. Yes, they'll be paid back over time. So I think that's why a lot of people are rejecting, saying, well, because that means you'll have to pay more in terms of tariff, because for three-phase meters, you have to pay more compared to the two-phase meters. So maybe that's also another angle to that, because I have gone through it, and believe me, it's never pretty.
All right, just one more on the front page of the Nigerian News Direct. NSAS, traditional rulers push for dialogue to resolve youth grievances. That's the story you'll find on page 2. And of course, you'll see a picture on the front page of traditional rulers as well as the governor of Lagos State there. This whole youth grievances, judicial panels of inquiry sitting, NSAS and all of that seems to have tapered down now. But do you see any resolution even with this intervention of traditional rulers?
It's a shame that traditional rulers have been emasculated from when they became public servants under the government and lost a lot of their authority. I think if they were more than symbolic heads and they actually had substantive power, I think rather than sitting back and observing this happening, I think they would have taken a more proactive role, and I believe they're closer to the people and they could actually have made a big difference. So coming out at this point is a good thing, but I think it's too little too late. I think from back in Awolowo's day with the action group, when they salaried the traditional rulers, I think that was the beginning of the end of the kind of influence they could have had over their subjects, to where this call now will have little or no effect.
But we're looking at a constitutional review, and there are people calling for traditional rulers to have at least some role in the Constitution. If you say this is the end, you don't see a possibility of that happening in this whole constitutional review process?
I doubt it. It would be a good thing, but ultimately for that to happen, we'd have to throw out the entire Constitution, which Omar Agege said yesterday that they don't even have the authority to do. All they can do is amend certain provisions. But to actually now introduce entirely new, unheard of tenets within that document is almost impossible to do. So I don't really think that they can now go back and undo the damage that was done 60 years ago when they took away the power from the traditional rulers. But back to what Aya was saying, where you see the judicial panels of inquiry, traditional leaders, all the various elements that are being brought to bear to try to reconcile the grievances of the youth that precipitated the NSAS protests. I think these are all good and will all coalesce into some sort of uniform understanding that will bring appeasement to the grievances of the youth.
What if
yes,
that coalescence that you talked about brings us to a point where there is a conflict in certain provisions of the Constitution that cannot address those needs of the youth that have coalesced into that thing that you talked about? What if ultimately, because it's on the same floor of the National Assembly that somebody declared vituperatively that Constitution can never give us peace. So if someone has said that on the floor of the Senate, and it's something that is still reverberating, and we are having issues as a result of that, and you're saying, and the Deputy Senate President of the Senate has said, we can't have a brand new constitution, where do we go from there?
Well, the starting point, of course, would be to look at how we can have a conversation about our differences. I think it goes back to, for example, the 2014 conference convened by the previous administration, where people from across the country were gathered and they had a conversation out of which emanated joint resolutions about the things they feel were compromises that sorted out all our differences and gave us a common ground from which to live together. So maybe we need to look back. Unfortunately, the resolutions from that conference were never adopted. The previous administration didn't get it done before it left, and the new administration said they're not interested in looking at it because they were not a part of the process that brought it into existence. So maybe what we need to do is look at how we negotiate or renegotiate our togetherness from a standpoint of where we address the contending issues that are dividing us.
Doing it is not the issue now. The challenge would be how. We have done it through the 2014 conference.
Yes.
And we are, quote unquote, stuck. Yes. So how then do we go from there?
Well, the 2014 conference didn't have what they call legal backing. It was there were recommendations. So they needed to take additional steps to give it the force of law or the legal backing that would now make it contractual upon all of us. So whatever we seek to negotiate among ourselves should be given the force of law. The National Assembly should be brought in, the executive, all the arms of government. Look, for example, now, the Northern Elders yesterday called for the resignation of the president. That is unprecedented. No matter how you look at it, the North has always been unified in their support of their own. So for them to have actually stood up now and said, President Buhari, you are not meeting up to expectations in terms of security, and the North is most plagued by this, to the point that they can actually say, go, and be willing for a Southern Christian to step in and their own person be removed. What it means is that we've gotten to a point in this country now where ethnicity, tribe, religion, none of that matters anymore. We're all under a yoke of a common problem that could sink each and every one of us. So it doesn't matter who you are, where you're from, we're all susceptible to what's happening now. And I think that our democracy has turned a corner. Although there's some rumblings underneath that the Northern Elders Forum has some political basis. They endorsed a different candidate for the last election. Their leader, Ango Abdullahi, who was a vice chancellor and a minister, has been known to be antagonistic towards the current president. However, he has backed the administration on things relating to the North all the time in the past. Herdsmen, Ruga, opposition to restructuring, all the positions that the president has taken, they've stood with him, especially as they relate to the North. So for that body to stand up yesterday and say, President Buhari should resign, I think that is very telling.
Well, next up is Daily Trust. A different tilt, really. Business owners groan over Naira crash. Buying dollar above 450 Naira, not sustainable. That's coming from importers. CBN blames bribe givers for Forex hike. And experts say monitor BDCs to tame racketeering. So yet again, money, the Naira against the dollar. And you know what happens when we have challenges. You go to the market and everything is reflecting the dollar.
Even the price of pepper, and that's...
How's that related? But it's on page 5, and you understand why this is a concern, because our economy is largely dependent on that. Our earner is in dollars and all that. But page 5 has more details. But, you see the picture of a traditional rulers, again, on front page of Daily Trust newspaper. Terrorism may persist for another 20 years in Nigeria. Buratai. There's being honest, being frank, but then there's the way people will take this. Now, hearing that terrorism may persist for another 20 years in Nigeria, how do you expect people to take this, really?
it befuddles my mind that anybody could be that blunt in a way that reflects back on himself, because it's his responsibility basically to deal with this issue of terrorism, and for him to say he's admitting he's overwhelmed, and that just lends credence to the call for his ouster. I would say that it's good to be blunt, but you have to be sensitive to the concerns of the people. Look, for example, at Garba Shehu, who is being carpeted now because of two things he said in the last few days. First and foremost, he said, oh, the president cannot be made to remove the service chiefs unless nobody can force him to remove them until he's ready to do so himself. He also said something to the effect of, oh, the 43 farmers who got killed in Borno didn't get military clearance before they went to their own farms to harvest their own crops or to go and work where they were employed. And those are insensitive comments based on the temper and temperament of the public at this point in time. So I would say that for Buratai to say terrorism will be with us for another 20 years is highly insensitive, especially at this time when there are deaths, there are maimings, there are robberies. The insecurity is so rife. You are admitting failure, and you are also now saying that not just have you failed, but you can't even see your way to an immediate resolution. It means you're not capable of doing that job, and it's time for you to move on.
Well, I'm thinking the good part is may persist for another, so we're hoping that it will not persist, but that's what you had on the front page of the Daily Trust this morning.
Maybe one would have to take a look at what's in the details on page 4, I think, of the paper this morning, because there has to be a context to that one.
Yes.
The Guardian newspaper leads this one with Nigeria rakes in 7.8 trillion naira from company income tax in 6 years. And that's what we have there. Wrong to blame recession on low tax revenue. That's according to the CITN president. Financial institutions, telcos contribute 21%. And economists seek expansion of tax net and reclassification. Well, this is another angle to the money talk this morning. And, if one is to look at, compare that with what you have on the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper this morning. Is there really any comparison? On the one hand, the Naira has fallen. On the other hand, the CITN president is saying low tax revenue is not the reason for recession.
Well, I don't see how you can. They're not mutually exclusive. One way or another, they're interrelated. And I would say that that figure over 6 years looks like it's a whole lot, but it really isn't when you break it down. 7 trillion naira in 6 years, that's roughly 1 trillion a year. When you break it down, especially in light of the value of the naira versus the dollar, and since we buy everything imported anyway, so the naira value has no intrinsic meaning because we're going to spend it in dollars anyway. So it's not a whole lot of money. And yes, of course, we need to be more civically responsible. I think both corporately and individually, I think more people need to be brought into the tax net. I think that this notion of it's only our resources that should generate revenue for us is proven not sustainable. The money is never enough. So we need to corporately, I think the tax boards are doing quite well with corporate taxes in terms of chasing down those who should pay. But on an individual income level, I think we can do better.
Do you think they even need to be chased down when it's DFS, deduct from source? Well, we have to thank you very much this morning. Mr. Adayo Akitobi is publisher of TCN, today's Community News. Thank you so much for your time and thoughts.
Always a pleasure.